Okay, we're back for part 3. So right now you're saying, oh my gosh, there's so much to manage, the laws and the risks and the vectors and the response and everything else that goes with it. So we introduced the concept of a security dashboard. A lot of organizations are using a security dashboard nowadays to provide that big picture, full, comprehensive view of all the key performance indicators and alerts that are going to tell you when you're under attack and what you can do about it. So the purpose of a security dashboard then is to reduce that effort required to monitor and identify threats. Some are even have automatic responses built in. And so when we implement that dashboard, we want to look at our key performance indicators. What are we trying to monitor that we feel that's most at threat for us? And then you could create a dashboard similar to this on your own. Okay, but organizations have to carefully manage the security of the organization and the security of the networks that go along with it. And so in carefully managing our networks, we have to implement strong measures to ensure that sensitive data is not accessible. And so we set up roles-based controls, right? Are often referred to as role-based access control. And we use authentication methods. Remember, I said earlier in chapter 2, I want to know who's on my network and what they're doing. Well, part of knowing who's on your network is good authentication, right? And this is generally considered something you know, something you possess, or something you are. So, for example, something you are would be biometrics, right? Something you know is a PIN. Something you have would be your cell phone. It's why you do two-factor authentication often today when you're accessing your bank by sending a code to your phone. That's a second factor. It's something you possess. Okay? But as I mentioned, something you are. That would include biometrics, right? Facial features. I use facial recognition to access my home computers, for example. Something I am that cannot be replicated by others. Now, in addition to that, in addition to authentication, you might want to add firewalls, right? The implementation of a corporate firewall system, this would be software, hardware, or a combination of software and hardware for a firewall that stands guard between the organization's internal network and the external network. So you'll have your firewall between the external and the internal. The firewall sits right here. And there's also the concept of a next-gen firewall. This is also hardware or software-based network security, and it's meant to detect and block sophisticated attacks by filtering the network traffic. So you want to have all your ports turned off, and you want to have that accept the ports that you want to allow access to. And you want to make sure that you have a deny all as a rule and only certain traffic allowed through, all the rest denied, right? A next-gen firewall is also going to do a deep packet inspection. So a normal firewall is only going to look at the headers in the old days. Today, a next-gen firewall and an IP address in the header can be spoofed, right, or tricked. Today, it's opening up the packet itself and looking in. It's doing a deep dive into the packet. So it adds considerable more security along the way. There are routers as a networking device, also part of this. And it's going to connect multiple networks together, right? So this network and this network has a router in between them, and if this network wants to talk to this network, it'll send it to the router. The router will check an ACL, or allowable list, and access control list, and it'll say, yes, that person's allowed to talk to this network over here. And so it's an additional layer of security along the way. to be aware of. There's also encryption used throughout. So encryption is the process of scrambling your data so that people can't see what it is. Hey, they've been doing encryption since the Roman days, the Caesars. In fact, there's the Caesar cipher, if you want to look that up. So encryption's been around a long time, but we do it with our traffic, so that even if you do get access to my traffic, you, the hacker, the bad person, the hacktivist, the script kiddie, cannot open it up or understand what it's about, because we have encryption keys. And the encryption key is a value that we apply using some algorithm, and the various different algorithms out there. In my company, we use only NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. We use only NIST approved ciphers for encryption. So they're very strong, right? And they're going to generate that random sequence of characters along the way. I did want to just mention AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. This is the most widely used symmetric algorithm, and it's entrusted to protect U.S. classified data. The U.S. government uses AES, and so my company does as well, because we're interested in a high secure encryption environment. From a wireless perspective, it's one reason we use what's called WPA2, because WPA2 uses AES for its encryption. Now, I did want to touch on TLS. TLS creates a tunnel, or it encapsulates your data. It encrypts it and encapsulates it so that the data transmits over the wire, it's still protected. So it's common in my company, we'll take encrypted data. If somebody has a right to it, we'll decrypt it, we'll wrap it around TLS and send it over the internet for them. They cannot, a hacker could not see the data in that case. So protected by TLS. It's considered encryption in transit. It's data in transit encryption along the way. So very, very useful approach to encrypting data in transit. When I'm encrypting data at rest, I use AES 250. What I like about proxy servers is that they act as a proxy. They stand in the middle. So instead of traffic coming to my web server where it could be damaged, instead it comes to a proxy first. It filters it, it does security checks, and then routes it to the web server that it needs to go to, for example. Another important concept is VPN, or virtual private network, especially in this post-COVID day. So it's a big problem for companies as COVID hit, and a lot of companies matured very rapidly. But VPN enables remote users to securely access their network and all the data and computing devices that are on the network. And VPN, often it's IPsec is the secure mechanism used that will do encryption and ensure confidentiality, integrity, and it will also authenticate your data. So it's not CIA, right? That's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. IPsec over VPN will do confidentiality, integrity, and access or authorization, right? So, but it's very powerful, and you would not want to run a remote organization without it today. So we want to then implement CIA on the network, and there are various ways that you can go ahead and do that. One of the things is at the application level. This is the layer 7 level of the model, is 1 through 7 layers. And so the application layer is layer 7. And the transport layer would be layer 3, for example. And the data layer would be layer 2. You can look those up on your own time. But realize that authentication is still going to be key to access, right? And I mentioned RBAC, or role-based access. So not only do you have authentication credentials, a username and password, and probably two-factor authentication, so you'd have maybe biometrics. Remember, two-factor is something you have, something you know, something you are. There are actually other ones now, some where you are, these sort of things. So there are a few others today, but the common are something you have, something you are, and something you know, like a PIN. And then, of course, encrypting the data. These ensure CIA at the application level. At the end user level, though, right? So there's the application server level, right? This web application that might be processing your credit card data. But then there's the end user. So here's another layer of protection on top of the others. The end user is critical. And so we want to make sure end users are educated. So it's common that most companies require annual security awareness training. You want to have limited roles and responsibilities. This is called least privilege for the end users. You want to minimize the roles they have. You want to make sure antivirus software is installed on all of the end user machines. End user machine can be the server itself, or it can be your own personal laptop or cell phone for work purposes. And of course, you'd want to data encrypt that along the way. Now, so there's kind of a checklist for end user security. You'd want to ask these questions as an information systems professional as you're standing up protection to ensure CIA of your corporate network and data. And so you might ask, for example, about the antivirus software you have installed, or how often are the virus signatures updated. So as I mentioned, for a virus, we know almost every virus out there, right? And so that gets a signature, which then gets funneled to these various organizations and implemented in our systems to ensure that we have the latest virus definitions out there. Here are some other questions that you could continue to ask and answer for your organization at the end user level. Okay, so implementing these safeguards will help stop malicious attacks. Don't forget, people that leave the company, departing employees or contractors, confiscate their login information and disable their accounts immediately. I mentioned least privilege, so we want to define user roles and give them the least privilege they need to actually get their job done. And that should be tied to their user account as well. So when we go to detect a cyber attack, this is very important. We will want to incorporate an intrusion detection device. An IDS is going to help us defend ourselves against a cyber attack, right? It will help contain the incident, and it will eradicate it at the same time while alerting your team to do incident review and follow up along the way. Now, some companies pay someone to do some of these functions. That's called a Managed Security Service Provider, or MSSP. My company has one that helps us to respond to incidents along the way. And finally, computer forensics. How do we figure out, in the end, who did what to us? We owe this to shareholders, to customers, to ensure that we maintain their confidence and we follow up for legal action. So computer forensics is a discipline that combines elements of law and computer science to identify, examine, and preserve data from the security systems, from the networks, from the storage devices, in a manner that preserves their integrity and makes them irrefutable in a court case if you need to do that. So here are some questions that you could review on your own that you may ask in a forensics approach. All right, that is it. Chapter 2, fun. See you online.